Welcome, everybody, to the Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Basics presented by Justin's Crypto Community Group.
Boop,
Uh,
boop.
yeah, thank you. Thank you all for joining the group. If you're watching this on a recording and didn't get to join live, feel free to shoot me a note for any questions that you may have on any of the material covered today. So we'll start off. I'm going to give a little bit of my background, why I started this group, and really what this group is. So I'm an engineer by training. I went to school at the University of Purdue, Purdue University. I've worked in the food industry for about 7 years, and now I have actually started my own business, my own startup, and it actually touches the blockchain space in its final state. Cryptocurrency and blockchain in general became something that I was really interested in late 2016, early 2017. I've watched the industry boom in 2017, bust, and now grow again for those of you that have been around long enough to experience those peaks and valleys as well. And really, why I started this group was I've witnessed a lot of my friends and family struggle to get into the space, mainly due to the high barrier of entry that the technology imposes on them. And very similar to how the internet in its first version was very limited, uh, difficult to connect to. You couldn't be on the phone at the same time, right? But now we just connect, enter a password, and then we browse in an uninterrupted manner until we leave that location. And blockchain and cryptocurrency are really going through a very similar transformation right now. And I want to help my friends and family thrive in the new space, whether it's investing, working with the apps, or even just becoming more knowledgeable about it. And I want to continue to make some money as the space matures as well. So, what this group is a place for all of the people who are interested in investing or earning money through cryptocurrency to join and share ideas and grow together, right? We're all learning. So, lifetime learners here. So, if we're going to start at the beginning, then we really ought to start at the beginning and ask why. So, Bitcoin, the very first cryptocurrency that was ever founded, it came to fruition shortly after the collapse of the global economy in 2008. And the very first line from the Bitcoin white paper, it reads, "A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution." And for those of you who were around in 2008 and remember, it was a time of major distrust in the financial institutions. And I'm not certain that even today we fully trust them any longer. But Bitcoin was the beginning. So all of the projects out there now, all of the cryptocurrencies, all of the blockchains, all of the companies who've been founded, all of the startups, if you wind all of those back, they all started with the genesis of this white paper in 2008. This was really the first serious proposal of the use of such a technology outside of some educational research done in the 80s. But at its core, blockchain was invented to power the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. So that's a very important takeaway. And so, what is a blockchain, right? So, in complete honesty, blockchain is a very, very technically dense concept. It involves complex technologies like cryptography, distributed ledger technology, and high level networking. So, I'm going to go over a few key technical points as simply as I possibly can, but all of these are very important in the foundational understanding of what is a blockchain. So, a blockchain is simply a spreadsheet. That is the most simple version of a blockchain that I can present you with is it is an Excel spreadsheet or a database. And it's just a ledger, right? Just recording transactions. Second, there are no rows in this spreadsheet, just blocks. So blocks of information rather than rows of information are chained together and comprise this very elaborate spreadsheet. Number three, the records are all in chronological order. So similar to how Excel spreadsheets read from top to bottom, the blocks read from number 1 to X, whatever we're on now, close to 700,000. As data comes in and transactions, they fill a block. When the block gets full, it's chained to the one in front of it. A new block of transactions is created about every 10 to 15 minutes. Number four, the only real very, very used use case in the space for blockchain is just for storing transactions for currency. So one of the, obviously it was birthed from the pain point of banks and the global collapse, but its first use was actually just to track the historical transactions of cryptocurrencies. Number five, everybody that's participating in this network has a copy of this spreadsheet, so no one can cheat. No one's allowed to cheat because somebody else who owns the spreadsheet will call them out. Like, that's a fake transaction. It's not going into the block. And the final point, the records can never be changed and they are public to view for anyone. So the main point to take away from this is that cryptocurrencies use blockchains to store their transaction histories. Just a spreadsheet. Okay, so now what you're looking at here is basically proof of that last point, right? I was able to go to the web and find the first Bitcoin block that was ever created. It was created on January 8th, 2009, shortly after the white paper came into existence. And like I said before, these records cannot be changed. So this transaction has been there for over 10 years and is still accessible by us. We didn't even make that transaction. And at the time of writing, so yesterday when I was putting this together, the 663,449th block was created. And it's also important to note here that this is a trustless system, okay? So there is nobody that we have to place trust in for this system to function correctly. Every form of currency that was invented before Bitcoin, we have to rely on a central authority to use that currency, right? The banks. And that central authority over time becomes the central weakness that leads to the decline of these currencies. And this is kind of just a visual explanation of that trustless system, okay? So earlier we were talking about the batches of transactions. When a transaction is created, the transaction is sent out to every computer that has the spreadsheet. And all of those computers, through a very, very complex process that we're not going to talk about today called mining, they all confirm these transactions. They validate. They move them from a pending state to a confirmed state. And we could probably have a whole series of webinars about how mining works and the comparisons between Bitcoin and gold and how mining is actually derived from gold. But the point is, the miners work to validate the transactions that the network sends to them. Then they just shove them into the blocks, chain the blocks together. Once the block is complete and added to the chain, your transaction is complete. So it is important to also talk about the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrency because they are not the same. A cryptocurrency is not a blockchain, and a blockchain is not a cryptocurrency. A blockchain enables the cryptocurrency to run. A cryptocurrency can be used for real world transactions, okay? And some of the key points here are noted. It's a decentralized technology, records the transactions, which we've talked about. It has no value. You can't transfer a blockchain to somebody else. They can't receive your blockchain and send it back. It is just it's just the guts. It's what makes the cryptocurrency run. And then a virtual currency, right, is a cryptocurrency. They're used in transactions on the blockchain, right? If I send you cryptocurrency, you send it back, those transactions are logged in the blockchain. And then these can be also invested in. That's what a lot of you maybe even tuned in today for, or will tune into future webinars for. But these can be transferred. They can accrue wealth, and they can be measured over time to increase in value. So two very, very different entities that cannot, a cryptocurrency cannot exist without the blockchain. All right, so now let's talk about some real world transactions. So you might be wondering after all this, like, okay, well, what was the first purchase, right? So the first purchase, actually, it's really kind of cool. Maybe not so cool for the guy that made it, was to purchase a pizza. So in 2010, Laszlo Hanyecz made a purchase at the time for 2 pizzas for a price of 10,000 Bitcoins. Now, when he made that purchase, the Bitcoin price, really all 10,000 of those were worth only $41. But it was a pretty monumental transaction in the point that someone else could recognize value in the asset, and it was completed without a third-party intermediary whatsoever. No bank settled the transaction. There was just nobody involved besides the person that had the Bitcoin and wanted pizza, and the people who would accept Bitcoin and had the pizzas. And so, really it was monumental for the time, and it's kind of just a really, really cool thing to know. And similarly to how we could actually go and look up the very first transaction that ever took place in Bitcoin, we can also find this guy's pizza transaction, even though it wasn't ours. Right, you're looking right here at the very first record of purchasing these pizzas, right? You see right there the total input, the total output, small fee and gas. But today, the same transaction, 10,000 Bitcoin, are actually worth $270 million. That is one expensive pizza. And also, of course, somebody went out and made a Twitter. So if you care to keep up with the Bitcoin pizza price on a regular basis, you can actually go and follow at the Bitcoin Pizza on Twitter, so that you can always be reminded of the mistake, or not the mistake, I guess, but the expense, the true expense of that pizza on that day. Okay, so then cryptocurrencies, right? Let's talk about these, right? So we know that blockchain has to be beneath a cryptocurrency to power it, but cryptocurrencies are beginning to go mainstream. And, there's a lot of opportunity, very similar to some of the first internet companies and websites and, products that you could buy then. We're going through the same technical transformation phase for blockchain now that we were then for the internet. And I'm going to draw some very easy to understand, I hope that's the point, analogies similarities, between the stock market and cryptocurrency. And now I want to just preface this by saying that there really is not a lot that's the same about them in practicality, but how we access them, how we purchase this asset class, how we exchange this asset, a lot of the infrastructure is very similar to how stocks are traded and sold, bought, and invested in. So you can really think of, for the purposes of this example, a Bitcoin is equivalent to a stock. Now you might be wondering, we've only talked about Bitcoin, right? What are all these other coins on the right? You got Bitcoin Cash, Polkadot, a Binance coin. And what these are people's inventions, right? People's ideas, companies. They've come up with their own uses for blockchain, and they've built their own blockchain, and they're using it for different purposes. And we'll get into some more of those later, particularly around Ethereum. But currently there are more than 700 coins out there right now, although most are approximately worthless. And if you're a new investor in the space, I would caution you not to go outside of some of the top 10 or 20 coins. Unless you're super risky, then more power to you. But all of these coins really kind of take a piece of what Bitcoin did initially and made it their own, right? So they've developed their own blockchains that are similar to the one beneath Bitcoin. They've also forked them. I don't know if you've ever heard of forking a blockchain, but you can actually almost like Control CV, and then you just use it how you want. Right. And so Bitcoin really opened the door for a lot of these other entities to build projects and ideas and invent things. We're in, this really fast growth stage, just again, like we were when the internet was developed. But for the sake of example here, consider, a stock to a coin, right? You can buy both. And actually now, even as Robinhood has introduced the ability to buy fractional shares, right? So maybe somebody can't afford to buy a whole Apple share or a whole Tesla share. You can buy portions of them now. And you can do the same thing with cryptocurrency coins. You can buy a percentage of a total coin. So that's a good distinction to make between the two. And cryptocurrencies going mainstream continued. So how do you buy a stock, right? So you've got to go to an exchange, right? Well, we need to look at the exchanges as well. Similar to how people buy and sell stocks, there has to be a place where people can buy and sell cryptocurrency. And just like with stocks, we as consumers, we get to choose what exchange we go to and get our cryptocurrency from or sell our cryptocurrency on. A lot of the name brands here on the left, I'm sure that, like the E-Trades, the Fidelities, the Vanguards, very established names. And then if you look here on the right, you may see some names that you recognize, maybe some that you don't, but these are exchanges that are purely for the sale and purchase of cryptocurrency. Some of these are international. Some of them aren't allowed to be used in the United States. Some are. There's still a lot of murky area and gray area in the legislation in the United States and how they're being receptive or not so receptive to cryptocurrency. But these are the places that you go and make your purchases. And again, we were going to wind up here. Uncle Sam always gets his piece. So, taxes are treated the same from a capital gains perspective as they are on the sale of a stock that's appreciated or depreciated in value. So when it comes to capital gains, there's no difference in taxes between Bitcoin gains and stock gains. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are treated as property per the IRS Notice 2014-21. If you're holding Bitcoin as an investment, they are subjected to the same capital gains taxes just like stocks and securities. So sorry about that, Debbie Downer. And then we get into Ethereum. So Ethereum is another cryptocurrency. And now digital currencies are great, right? They run on their own blockchain. You can buy and sell them, send them to others for goods and services, just like we had talked about before with the pizza and other applications that are now coming up. But there was something missing from the industry. And it didn't take long for the development community to realize that we could build applications on top of a blockchain ledger. The realization of this effort brought us Ethereum. Now, Ethereum enables us to build things on top of the blockchain, very similar to the first applications of the internet or the computer, even, right? So, Paint, Microsoft Word, Minesweeper, right? When you type a word into a Word document, a lot happens behind the scenes in the computer. And really, you can kind of think of Ethereum as doing that behind the scenes work, except for blockchain applications. Now, if we take a look at this graphic, and we see we have 3 layers. Just like every other cryptocurrency that we've talked about, there has to be a blockchain beneath it. And so you'll see that there in the very bottom, the blockchain, Ethereum blockchain network, the hardware, the computers that are running around the world that are managing, this blockchain network, and the miners and people that are keeping the network running, right? That's the blockchain layer. Now, there are 2 other layers that you can see here, the smart contracts layer and the decentralized applications layer. And applications are just what we talk about when we go to an app store or use an app on a computer or phone. This is what we interact with, right? The human interface, stuff that makes sense, words in English, X's to close, pluses to open, right? The things that really allow us to use tools, apps, right? Now, this middle layer is very important. So this is the smart contracts layer. So this is where all of the logic, the computer stuff, the code, the hard to understand and super dense technical stuff. It's like a brain almost that goes in between what we interact with and the Ethereum blockchain network at the very bottom where the raw data is stored. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. We're going to go through an example of really, one of the very first applications that was released on the Ethereum network many years, well, not many, but a few years ago, and really kind of step through each of these layers as we walk through that application. It is also worth noting that Ethereum is the second most valuable cryptocurrency currently. And that is because largely of its potential. I believe that it's only really behind Bitcoin until people discover its true applicability and how it really can change the world in so many different ways. I believe Bitcoin remains at the #1 position because it led the way. Right? It is the digital gold. There's a finite amount of it, right? Like the Bitcoin, we can't just print Bitcoins forever. There's only 21 million of them that can be mined. And that's it, right? So once they're mined, we can't continue to make them and send them into the market to make existing Bitcoin less valuable. So here's a great example of the Ethereum application. So this is one of the very, very first applications that was released on Ethereum. So what do these look like, right? The most famous one, I love to talk about this one. I love to talk blockchain and crypto regardless, but it was called Crypto Kitties. And it was kind of a joke at first, but it really caught a lot of traction because it was usable. And how you can really kind of explain this is it was like this application, this decentralized application or DApp. It was like a digital Pokemon that allowed users to buy, trade, grow and sell kitties, cats to each other. And so if we think about this Ethereum blockchain application in terms of what we just saw on the previous page, you can think of the application layer as what we interact with to get to the application and the front end of it, right? What does it look like? How do we interact and navigate and complete tasks and do stuff, right? And you can actually see here on the right, I've included a screenshot of one of my wallets and the actual button that you click to go to the decentralized application area, right? So they're, similar to an app store. It's like the DApp store, kind of to not put too fine a point on it. But you get to this application and then you can use it, right? So then once you're in the application, the rules of the game, right? The smart contract layer, that's where the smart contract comes in, right? How do we play the game? What are the rules, right? I can't just log in and steal somebody's kitty, right? I can't pay them less than the price they're asking to sell their kitty for. I can't kill a kitty, right? So, there are rules of the road within this application, and all of that is kept inside of the smart contract layer, right? And it's everything has rules, right? You can't open up Microsoft Word and order a peanut butter sandwich from Domino's. It's just outside of the use case of Microsoft Word. And so the smart contracts give these applications structure. They give them rules to abide by, and it makes it easier to interact with them. And then finally, as we worked our way down from the application layer to the smart contract layer, now we're back down at the blockchain layer, right? So that is where all of the records are kept, okay? So the smart contract layer is taking stuff from the application layer that we give it and feeding it down into the blockchain layer. That's where we know who owns what cats. That's where we know where to find the cats, where they're located, how old they are, how much they're worth. The raw records, that is where those are kept on the bottom layer. Because remember, all we're doing, if you simplify this down to a spreadsheet, we're just editing a spreadsheet, right? That's all we're doing through the use of this application. And there are some unintended consequences. So this particular decentralized application, it went off like crazy. Everybody was playing this. I remember back in 2017, I would get notifications on my phone that the Ethereum network was down again because Crypto Kitties was eating up all of the transaction volume. And so really this was kind of like the very first segue into, okay, we can actually use the blockchain for an intelligent application. And that really kind of opened the doors for industry. It opened the doors for startups, personal projects. It really kind of just set everybody on the same level and said, okay, let's invent. And you kind of see that now in a lot of larger, actually very large entities, right? So Ethereum let the cat out of the bag, no pun intended, for the supply chains. So think about what IBM is doing. So IBM has built, of course, they're a first mover in the technology space, but they've built their own blockchain, right? And they called it the Hyperledger. Everybody has their own name for their own blockchain. But they also have a layer of intelligence, smart contracts that are built on top of the Hyperledger. And then they have application layers above that people interact with, okay? And you can kind of see here that IBM Food Trust. So what they're doing is they're actually saying, how can we use blockchain to track food from farm to table, right? this system without, the need for an intermediary or, an entity to own all the transactions, right? Like they eliminated the middlemen in a lot of these situations. And, let's think about somebody picking lettuce and how that head of lettuce ends up in the grocery store, right? So a farmer picks it in a field. There's probably, prior to blockchain and IBM Food Trust's initiative, there might have been a clipboard with some paper on it, and they wrote the lot numbers down. And they turned those lot numbers into their company, along with probably some quality data and other attributes about that field. And then they load that lettuce onto a truck. And the truck gets some, but not all the information from the farmer, right? And the trucker starts on his way. Maybe he forgets the paperwork even. I'm sure it's happened. He or she, the driver. And then the driver is, taking this head of lettuce. Now it's in his possession, this trucking company's possession. He takes it, gets it to the store, right? So he doesn't necessarily know all the information about the lot that it came from or who the farmer was that picked it. But the trucking company, were probably doing their own quality checks. Perhaps the truck was climate controlled, right? And they tracked all of that data. And then they, get to the supplier. They don't have to share all of that information with the retailer. The retailer just realizes that now lettuce is in the back of the house, and they got to stock the shelves. So then they, have paper or some sort of record keeping system for inventory. They log whatever information came from the trucking company that they also got from the farmer, right? And then they put that information in their system, and none of that is shared with the consumer. And there's just a head of lettuce with a lot code. So the lot code is really the only piece that made it all the way through, right? Best by a week or two from now, don't let it go bad. But what blockchain has enabled IBM to do is say, okay, let's take all the paper out of the equation and let's put smart contracts in these positions where there is a transfer from one entity to the other, right? So maybe the smart contract that's between the farmer and the trucker doesn't allow the truck to be loaded until the farmer's name, the farmer's company, the lot of the field, the field's location are all input into a digital system. And then once all of that information is there, then the truck is able to take the load. Then the truck can drive the load, right? And it can't offload until the information that it's inherited through this IBM Food Trust is passed along down the chain and continuing to add additional attributes, right? So the trucking company, maybe they'll add in their temperature data about this particular load that was delivered to the retailer, right? Then the retailer, they have the ability to use all that information. And what we wind up with is you at the grocery store picking up a head of lettuce, and instead of just seeing a lot code and a Best Buy, you have the farm, the location, and you have dates and timestamps with all of this, the truck it was on, the time of delivery. And you can see how this type of control over transfer allows for the end consumer to have more value. And for the case of, like, let's say a recall, right? How easy is it to just go and query that information to figure out, okay, well, we've got runoff into lettuce field X, right? Okay, we have to notify the retailers. All right, this becomes simply an exercise in asking the database or the spreadsheet what is where, right? The database, the spreadsheet, the blockchain at the very core level still knows. And all of that information, because it connects all of these different entities throughout the process, you have all of that at the end result. And that's just one use case of many. There are also banks, right? So, JP Morgan is building their own digital currency. Now, if that makes you kind of think, oh, that's weird, that's probably a good thing, because the idea of cryptocurrency at its ethos is actually to circumvent the banks entirely, because we cannot depend on them as a trusted entity. And so, really, what you're seeing right now are some of these financial institutions that are focused on faster payments and settling times, right? If you send money through, your financial institution or Venmo or Cash App, it takes 3 days for that transaction to officially settle. And earlier, when we were talking about these batches of transactions being added to the blockchain, that happens every 10 minutes. Okay. That's powerful, right? If you can send money and it delivers and it settles within 10 minutes, not only does that really represent an existential threat to the banking system, it's much more efficient. And that's why these banks and regulation are scared of the development of these cryptocurrencies and all of these applications that can essentially render them as third-party intermediaries obsolete. And they're going to take their time. They're going to drag their feet until they figure out a way to monetize it themselves, creating their own digital currency that they don't share the transactional data with, right? Like that directly goes against the decentralized nature of a blockchain, right? Like, we couldn't go and look up JP Morgan's blockchain transactions on the internet. They won't make that public. So where's the transparency? And really what you're seeing now, like you can see here, this JPM coin is being used commercially by large technology clients to send payments. So, they're really seeking a way to centralize a decentralized technology. And I think we're really in for some interesting developments in the coming months and years, because there's at its core a very hard push and pull between the ideology of blockchain and how banks desire to use it and monetize it. And then also we have the Ethereum Let the Cat Out of the Bag Real Estate Edition, right? So you can see here one of the main takeaways from that we've been talking about today are these third parties that we have to trust to complete transactions. So what happens, when you can buy a house without having to hire a real estate agent? I mean, that sounds awesome. Who wants to save 6% on the sale of their house? If you're not selling a house, then I don't expect your hand up. But if you are, I mean, who loves 6% savings on their house? And that's really what you're kind of seeing, right? These tools are where these control points are at. We can implement code in these smart contracts rather than people, and we can put a very nice shell that faces outward to people, right? The application layer to interact with. So maybe in a couple of years, and there are active companies that are, rebuilding the way that real estate works, really, that are making MLS listings available for people to use themselves, and who are, doing, there's just a chain of events that must happen and must be controlled, right? Like, you can't do an inspection until you put in an offer. You can't do either of those, or you can't do that until you accept the offer, right? You can't get the keys until you make, the payment. So there's a lot of places where you can say, if this happens, then allow this to happen. And most of those situations are handled by people, when in reality, we can be more consistent, more objective, and more reliable when we write good code and good smart contracts to take care of that instead of a person. And so I'm pretty excited to see, what happens and how the space develops, and, who knows, what these applications will become one day. But we are still definitely in the early movers phase of blockchain becoming a reality. So, thanks for joining. I invite you to join our Facebook group if you'd like more information about this particular webinar or anything about the space, or if you just want to join, to be around like-minded people who also want to begin investing and earning in this fast-growing space. Feel free to join our group. And next time on our next webinar, we're going to use the foundation that we've learned today about how the blockchain works and how decentralized applications work. Now what we're going to do next time is how can we use these decentralized applications or dApps to make money in this fast-growing space. So thanks for joining. I know we finished a little bit early, about 15, 20 minutes early, but I guess I talked faster than when I practiced. And I'll be sharing these resources on our page. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly on Facebook and in the group. Thank you.